doing? Okay, I think we are good to go. What's up, everybody? My name's Thomas, and you're watching Elderwood Gaming. And yeah, this is my first stream. We'll see how this goes. I figured just to start things off, having a little bit of an intro kind of stream and walking through the 3 armies I'm currently running. One a little less than the other 2, I'll honestly admit. But yeah, I've been in the hobby for just a few months now. I started back in last year's fall. I used to play Age of Sigmar back during 2nd edition around 2016, 2017. Fell out of the hobby and then recently found myself back in the 40K side of things. But yeah, it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. I think the hobby side is more my thing, but I do enjoy all aspects of the hobby. So without further ado, I guess let's get into it. So I do have 3 armies currently. And the first one I fell into was Tau, I know. But let's face it, mech suits are super cool. So we'll start with the tray of crisis suits. So I am currently running more of a retaliation cadre list. So let's see if we can get this kind of making sense in here. So we've got Sun Forges back here, some 2 Star Scythe units, and then a unit of Fire Knives there. I'm just going to pull maybe a couple off of here just to show them a little bit closer. So as you can see, I went with sort of a, let's see, there we go, a brown and green color scheme. Kind of my idea for my sept is that they exist on kind of this auxiliary world where they're actually in pretty verdant forests. So they sort of adapted their armor and color scheme to match, and their set color is this bright, vibrant green, which green is my favorite color. You'll probably notice that I tend not to stray too far from green with my other 2 armies as well. But yeah, I really enjoy the crisis suits. To be honest with you, after I built the first box, I was not positive that I would be building more. They weren't at least my favorite kit to begin with. Here is one of my star size. So you'll see in some of the later ones, I actually started incorporating gray as well, and also the black as a little bit more prominent. Kind of the idea behind that, at least when I first started truly playing at the 1500, 2000 point level, I was running the prototype weapon cadre. So really cool detachment, a lot of fun to play. I think it's at least a little bit more beginner friendly. You can be a little bit safer with your units, but I will say that I feel it lacks the mobility that Tau really needs to be competitive in a lot of ways. Not that I'm a competitive gamer at all. I'm very much more of a casual gamer. My win-loss ratio definitely leans towards that as well. But yeah, basically the idea with the prototype weapons was that the suits would get banged up or they were getting new equipment. Didn't have enough time to put a fresh coat of paint on there. So they either left it primed or the bare silver. And that was kind of the idea. And it also just gave it a little bit more visual interest. I also have 2 enforcers on this sheet. Let me see if he will focus. There we go. Not gonna lie, working with this like mirror is difficult at times. Hopefully I'll be able to get used to that, give you guys a little bit cleaner view. I do run my commanders with all the same loadouts. At least the enforcers with the same loadout, and then the cold stars with the same loadout. Just makes my life easier. My opponents are already having to deal with quite the lengthy shooting phase. I don't want them to have to sit through me determining what each one does every time. So as you can see with this one, gave him some striping on his leg patterns just to change things up a bit. But yeah, that is the first tray. So I think to make my life easier, I'm just going to grab the second one from behind there and show you off my triple ghost keels. So with the ghost keel, while they are stealth suits that have, I'm sure, some level of cloaking technology, I thought it would be kind of cool to do a camo scheme, more of a traditional camo scheme at least. And these guys are a little bit gruffer, so as you can see, they're a little bit dirtier than the other ones. I kind of like the idea that these guys are sort of the front line. They're getting in there, kind of scoping everything out before the main force comes in, and working it that way. As it stands currently, my lists actually don't run these guys. Basically just, I think for right now, it's more so kind of getting the hang of the crisis suits. I think the crisis suits are a lot of fun to play with. Ooh, there we go. But I do think at least one of these guys is going to end up making it back in the list. I think that Tau kind of struggles with a quote-unquote distraction carnifex, and I think that these guys are actually a pretty solid choice for that. You know, they get infiltrate, lone op, and stealth. They can blink damage twice per game, which is really nice against some of the heavier hitting stuff in most of the other factions, las cannons, and that sort of thing. But overall, honestly, probably my favorite battlesuit design out of the entire Tau range. But yeah, just kind of getting used to the battlesuits in general, especially the crisis ones. I think right now I'm just running without them, just to kind of get an idea and a feel for all of that. So on this tray, I have mostly my infantry and then my broadsides. So we'll do the characters first. So I do have a Cadre Fireblade. Usually will... Ooh, these guys are a lot tougher. There we go. This guy will usually lead some of my strike teams. I went with strike teams over breachers to save a few points, but also an experimental weapon with the extended 6-inch range. I was able to get rapid fire a lot easier, and with those they could be quite devastating, and also the suppression fire making the infantry that you hit be -1 to hit was a lot of fun, and it was able to kind of slow some people down, but my current list only runs a single squad of the strike team, and I do run typically one ethereal just for the CP farming. So at the beginning of your command phase on your turn on a 4-up, you get a CP, and with retaliation cadre and honestly most of the Tau detachments, they are quite CP hungry. So that kind of 50% chance every turn. Focus for me, bud. There we go. So that's my other ethereal here. As you can see, the blue skin, still with the brown-green kind of flow. And then I guess I'll just grab maybe one of each of the fire team. Maybe they're kind of sergeant of each. Ooh, too close. Let's do this thing again. There we go. So these guys, their fatigues are kind of more of a army green with the brown and green on their armor, and then basic kind of gray silver on the weapons. One thing I do want to work on with this army in the future is rebasing. Because they're on more of a jungle-y kind of world, jungle-y, kind of woodsy, really verdant. I really want to have that come across in the bases more. I have a few that have some good texture. Primarily I use cork for a lot of my bases. And And one of the reasons that I think I spent less time on these bases is because when I was building this army, I was also taking part in my shop's crusade, which was a lot of fun. Here's their support turret. I actually really like how these look and how they turned out. But with the crusade, it is a lot of fun. It's a great way to learn your army in kind of a weird way, but I will say it's a ton of homework. And I also think it sort of struggles, at least with the Nachman Gauntlet, so that's the book that we were using, it really struggles with death spiraling. So as your units get destroyed, you have a chance of getting battle scars, and if you get the battle scars, then your units get kind of worse and worse over time, which totally makes sense. I think from a thematic perspective it does, but I will say after about 3 months of the crusade, a few of my units had been just dog tired, and had I had enough to be able to replace them, I definitely would have, but I was actually building up to 2,000 points during the crusade, and I will say that is not recommended. I would definitely not do that again if I were to do another crusade, especially with a new army. I would use an army that I've got quite a few points for to make sure that I can kind of field everything I need to and swap out units as I go, just in case something gets a little too knocked down. But moving on to my next units will be the broadsides. So I did get into the hobby, I think, at the opportune time for the retaliation cadre kind of ideal. So I started maybe a month or so before the Battle Force box for Tau came out. So I was able to get 3 of those and basically get 3 broadsides, 3 commanders, 3 ghost keels, and 3 riptides to really jumpstart my collection and also save a good bit of money. If you remember those, they basically were priced so the riptide was effectively free. And I'm kind of glad that that was sort of the quote-unquote free unit because I don't use riptides anymore. I do think they're a pretty valuable unit, pretty strong, but unfortunately for the points cost, I think it's somewhat better to run crisis suits with one of the commanders. You get more mobility, about the same objective control, maybe not as much specifically durability as the Riptide has, but I feel like the Riptide really benefits when it spikes, and it just does not spike as often as I think some of the Crisis Suit teams do. And I am in the process of these painting their packs. So let me see if I can get that to focus. So if you focus on the body itself, you'll notice there's a good deal of edge highlighting, but none on the missile block. That is actually a new change. I was running them with the plasma rifles just as some anti-elite stuff, but in my opinion, being able to do the indirect fire with the missiles just overall has been a lot more beneficial. It sort of helps spray off some infantry that may be hiding behind some ruins and that sort of thing. And since our play group basically plays with most of the, not WotC, not Wizards of the Coast, the typical Games Workshop terrain layouts, we tend to have a lot more ruins and that sort of thing, and it just ends up being better. I also just think in general that's the right choice. I like the Seeker missiles. I think the one shot is nice. It's a very strong weapon, but for me, having the weapon support system, which gives them the ability to ignore hit modifiers, and the weapons or the missile array is going to be able to clean up a few more units than the Seeker missile was doing for me. So I might pivot and have at least one with the Seeker missile if I find that bigger tanks are giving me a hard time. But for the most part, I think they are completely fine. And next up are the stealth suits. So yeah, I actually like this one a lot. Let me see if he's gonna. There we go. So the stealth suits were actually the first ones that I repainted. At least this unit is. You'll see with this next one that I show the sort of original scheme for these guys. Because originally they were going to be more gruff and kind of dirty, I guess is the best way to put it. So I had painted them as such with some more matte paint, matte finish, and sort of a wash to really grime them up. And these guys were a ton of fun to build and paint. Not a lot of surface area to deal with, but a lot of nice paneling to be able to shape some unique kind of patterns on. So they were pretty cool to kind of get back into the painting hobby and try and figure out a way to kind of make the scheme that I wanted to in a really cool way. So this was the third unit of them that I painted up. So these guys, I'll show maybe a couple other ones of these, because these guys actually have a few different kind of patterns on them. One of the melted ones. And then this guy. I thought I had like a checkered one. That one might have gotten repainted out of that scheme. Let me just check, because let's see. This one has an alternate panel that's painted, which is kind of cool. Sort of giving him sort of a neo, like a cool racing stripe almost. All right, so that is that tray. And the last tray for Tau, we've got my Cold Stars and Riptide. So while I don't run the Riptide, I did build one because I thought I was going to use it. And then, truthfully, it did not go too well. We'll start with the Cold Stars since I do think they're a bit cooler. So this Cold Star is my Warlord. They're a little bit on the weird size. So with Tau, generally the more of the set color that is on the model, the higher their rank. So with my Warlord, he has the most green per capita, you could say. But yeah, this is my Warlord. Had a lot of fun. This one ended up being repainted because, as I mentioned before, they were originally kind of more grungy, and I just kind of got to a point that I really didn't like it, and I like more of the clean Tau look than the grunge. So this one, as you can see, has a ton more black, has a few little specks of green, but is definitely of lower rank than the other Cold Star. I did show one of the Crisis suits that has sort of this tactical rock made out of some XPS foam. I think it's a pretty good way to add some height to the base, but also to protect that flying stand from snapping. Just gives it more to kind of hold on to. And lastly, we'll show off the alternate scheme of my Tau. So there was a brief point when I was beginning to repaint them. I debated switching from the brown and green to this blue and green. And honestly, this blue and green does look really cool. I had even tested one of the drones in this color, and I really enjoyed it. But there was just something still alluring to me about the brown and green. Just felt like a color that I've not really seen with Tau, and kind of made them unique and still stuck with my original idea of them being on this sort of woodland planet with a bunch of sort of Earth cast members of scientists to help develop more and more suits. But I might venture back into the blue scheme just because I do think it's kind of a cool thing. And then on the painting desk, I won't show these necessarily, but I do have 2 more units of crisis suits. So I have a Fire Knife and a Sunforge, basically to give me 2 of each, and then another Cold Star Commander. I am leaning towards liking the Cold Star a bit more, giving you the 12-inch move with your suits instead of the 8-inch standard is super nice, and the assault keyword on all weapons. I mean, the game is an objective-based game, right? You got to get points, you got to get objectives, and to do that, you got to be able to move. And having 12-inch move, honestly, is super great. You're going to be able to get to at least one objective on first turn if you need to, but being able to get around the board relatively quickly compared to your opponent is a huge win. I think Tau is great. It is, unfortunately, one of the more expensive armies, especially if you build Retaliation Cadre. It seems like if you go the Crisis Suit route, it's a very expensive list. You're usually running quite a few units of them, and per box, it gets really pricey really fast. But I've really enjoyed it. It was the unit or the army that I really wanted to start when I was looking at playing 40K. So I'm glad that I started with them. And I think, in my personal opinion, when you're starting an army, looks is king. You gotta like the way that your army looks, because if you don't, then you're just going to be in for quite a ride. Because let's face it, if you're not liking the way that your army looks and you're having to look at it for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours per unit, building and painting and getting ready and then playing them on the tabletop, like, you want to feel like a cool war master over your army, and that's just the best way to get there, right? It doesn't matter if you're losing a lot, if you feel like your army looks cool. And I really like my Tau. In the Crusade, I think I got last place outside of those that just kind of dropped out. But I ended up winning Best Painted, and that was a really cool feeling. It definitely felt great. I was able to show off my painting skills, and my shop recognized that, and I really enjoyed playing with people. We have a lot of really talented painters and players, so being able to come in, keep fighting until the bitter end, and then kind of come out on top with the painting, honestly, was just a really great feeling. But that leads kind of into my next army. So I started, like I said, about the fall of last year, and when I started with Tau, and then I had a friend that was really getting into Space Marine 2, and that's kind of how I got dragged into the tabletop game. He was basically like, oh, I think the board game, like the tabletop game, would be a lot of fun. And I was like, oh, cool. I used to play AOS. Like, I could maybe start learning 40K and start picking up some stuff and learn it, so that way I could teach you if you're interested in that. And he was like, yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool. So I basically bought a unit of stealth suits just to start building and get my chops back on building and painting and all that jazz. Very quickly kind of got pulled back in. Shortly after I bought that one, the Battle Force box is released. So I was basically like, all right, well, if I'm going full ham, like, now is the time to do it. So I ended up buying the Battle Force boxes and that sort of thing. That friend ended up not really getting into it, which is completely fine. Warhammer is a bit of an expensive hobby. But when I kind of realized he wasn't really getting into it, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need someone else to play with. So I'm going to need another army to be able to play against mine if I want to teach friends. So I started with Space Marines. So Space Marines were technically my second army. And I chose the Salamanders. Big surprise. They are green. So these ones I may not show too in depth. Maybe I'll just pick up a few. So with the Space Marines, I chose Salamanders because they're green. They're kind of the good, nice guys of, the Space Marine faction. I also thought having the green on the lava bases would look really cool, and I really do enjoy the look of them. They are sort of my messy army, so they're the army that I kind of use to kind of escape a bit of some of the drag out of like painting the armor of the Tau, which is very meticulous and very just, it can be very much at times. I'll show off one of my vehicles. So one of my later editions, this thing actually has not seen play on the tabletop yet. I kind of, because of the Crusade, I got really into my Tau and played my Tau quite a bit. And then I had started getting into my third army, which I'll discuss in a sec, and just ended up really falling in love with it. So I ended up playing that one a bit more. So with these later ones, I've started introducing new colors. So as you saw in the Land Raider, it had that mulled wine kind of color, and these guys have purple, just as a way to identify them as separate units. That way I can very quickly differentiate them from one another on the tabletop. So this is another of the purple guys, got it there on his jump pack. So, and I really do like the Space Marines. I like their aesthetic. I think, I mean, they're the poster boys of 40K. And I think rightfully so. I think they are really cool. You have a ton of different ways to play them. I went a little bit heavier. Obviously, with the Salamanders, you want sort of the flamers and that sort of thing. That's their whole vibe or whatever. So I went pretty heavy into that, running the Firestorm detachment, which honestly is a lot of fun. You know, you get the extra strength, extra AP, and assaults, which is just a lot of fun. Grabbing the other tray here. And then I just kind of fell out of them, honestly. I just sort of started playing my other armies. Here's my Brutalis, the best dreadnought in my opinion. The reason for that is they get the Brutalis charge, so they basically get tank shock for free, and if you have the CP, you can tank shock even with it. You're going to be doing a lot of mortals that way. But the other benefit is basically every weapon on that thing is twin linked, and with the Oath of Moment giving you the rerolls to hit and the +1 to wound when you're wounding on 3s and, you know, re-rolling your fails. It's just every weapon is just doing so much work that it almost seems unfair. Here's my Redemptor Dreadnought. Honestly, if I could run all Dreadnoughts, I think I would probably enjoy this army more. If you can't tell by now, I like big robots. They are just super cool. I sort of like the Space Marine Dreadnoughts being sort of this almost diesel punk, maybe is the right word. Definitely not steampunk, but I just love the overall aesthetic of the Dreadnoughts. Super cool. Not very fun to build. I'll admit that. I do not really like building them. Here's some Inceptors, which I have another squad of these that are not painted up yet. I just haven't really felt motivated to because I don't really play my Space Marines as much. They are honestly, in my opinion, on the chopping block for me. I'm considering abandoning the Imperium, so to speak, because here's some Eliminators. Yeah, I just don't play them. And when I'm going to the shop, I, get my carry case and I'm setting up and choosing the armies I want to take. And it's pretty much always Tau and Tyranids. They're just, in my opinion, more fun. I think it's not really, I think it is maybe a little bit of an aesthetic thing too. While I do love the way they turned out, there's my Vulcan Hastan. I will warn you, that little flame ring at the top is a nightmare. You have to be so careful when moving him around the battlefield that you will snap that. I've done it once and had to fix it, and he basically hasn't seen play since. But yeah, I just think for me, I've enjoyed the play style of the Tau and the Tyranids just so much more that my Space Marines just aren't really satisfying to play, which is kind of sad. I will admit I don't really like having invested in an army that I have found myself not really enjoying. And it's almost even more emboldened. So here's my Outrider, one of them. These guys won second place in my store's most recent painting competition. Basically, every month, our store manager picks a keyword, and you have to paint a unit with that keyword. Obviously, I mean, that just makes sense. And I had a lot of really great competition. We had some Chaos Spikes, a Juggernaut Lord for World Eaters, one of the Destroyers for Necrons that was really cool. It had like this moss effect over it, kind of like it had, been asleep for a long time and moss had grown over it, and it was just a really cool look. The base was really nice as well, kind of gave almost a Miyazaki, like a Studio Ghibli kind of feel. Really liked the work on that one. I think it could have won had it just had maybe a bit more contrast, some more je ne sais quoi, I guess. But yeah, I got second, mainly because with my Space Marines, they are grungy, so they have a lot of spatter and dust and muck and the lighting from underneath. It's kind of difficult for the volumetric highlighting to kind of show as well, at least with how I paint, because honestly for me, I'm not super excited about the army, but I also like the more grungy look with them, so I'm not really after that pristine look. So I've kind of decided that for the painting contest in the future, I'm likely to do Tau, just because I like them to be meticulous and very well painted, or I'll choose models from another faction that I might be excited to paint at that time, which I don't know which one I want to do yet, but I am thinking about kind of maybe a rainbow kind of army. When you see my Tyranids here in a sec, I think you'll kind of see I like some of the vibrant colors a bit more, and I think just being able to explore more colors and have an army that is colorful but still cohesive sounds like a lot of fun to do. But yeah, so let me pull over one of my Tyranid trays. We'll start with some of these infantry guys. So when I was neck deep in Tau and Space Marines, actually, I'm not going to start with this one. Yeah, maybe a little sneak peek of what's to come. But I wanted to start with my first model that I painted, because I think it exemplifies why I decided to paint Tyranids in the first place. So when you're painting a lot of armor on Tau, edge highlighting and being very careful, and then painting a lot of armor on Space Marines and having to just get coverage on those flat panels, even if you are going to grunge it up later, I wanted something more fun, something different, something I could kind of get sort of in deep with, and sort of just have a different vibe. And I went with Tyranids because I like bugs and dinosaurs, and they're as buggy and dinosaur-y as you can get, at least in 40K. And honestly, while I'm not a big lore guy in general, the lore of the Tyranids is super cool. I really like their whole thing of biomass and being all living creatures that, feed off of the planets and try and create new and better bioforms and just constantly improving themselves. It's just a really cool sensation. And also just this like idea of almost a perfect organism, you know, a lot like a certain alien movie franchise. But it doesn't, it shows up a little bit on camera. I think the light might be blowing it out a bit. But their carapace is actually, I put an iridescent medium over it. So it shines and glistens. It's got a little bit of like glitter flecks in it to give them sort of a chitinous bug-like armor. And then their skin is this nice blue with a lavender kind of overbrush washed in this really deep dark blue to give them this sort of otherworldly feel. And then their meaty bits and weapons are a dark green with this lime green highlight. Their brains, I use a very bright green. And as you can see with this one, so this is a synapse unit. So I decided to paint all the synapse rims green simply because remembering what has synapse and what doesn't is not the easiest thing in the world. And to be frank, I didn't want to have to constantly be looking at that and forgetting what has synapse and what doesn't. It's also just a lot quicker for my opponents to know what has synapse. So there's a lot fewer kind of gotcha moments when I'm playing my Tyranids, which for me feels a lot better. I don't really like gotcha stuff. I come from the world of Magic the Gathering where basically everything is a gotcha, and that just doesn't feel great. Here's my Swarm Lord. This one actually also won second place for monster/vehicle at my shop. Keep on losing out to the same guy, which is totally well earned. My buddy Shane is a fantastic painter. I think he won with the lion against this one, and it was a very well painted version of the lion. And he actually beat me with another Dark Angels unit with the Outriders. He did his Raven Wing, and he had them on this like nice jungly base, and just absolutely gorgeous paint job. Here's my Norn Emissary. So a friend of mine from the shop was not using it anymore, and he offered it to me, and I was like, yes, I will, but I'm not accepting that for free. So I ended up giving him one of my extra Riptides because he is also a Tau player. And with this one, you can kind of see better on the tail. I went with sort of a tiger stripe on here, so he ends up being a bit more blue, but really like how he turned out. The Norns are super fun to play with. I usually do the better choice, the 15 OC on their prime objective, which is a lot of fun. I'll put that down here. Then we'll go back to the one I was starting to show off. So here we have sort of Tyranid warriors. This is the Tyranid warrior prime with the bone swords and the claws. Which, fun fact about the warriors, if you look at the box art for the warrior models, you'll notice they don't have these arms. The arms that they have kind of stretch out to the sides more, and I really wanted those. So I was like freaking out because I thought for a minute like maybe for whatever reason my box directly from Games Workshop didn't have the proper sprue in it. And then I was looking and I was like, well, these just don't look the same at all. As you can see, these guys kind of have almost a like Batman gauntlet on there. But I wanted like the arms that the other ones had. So then I was looking at it, I was like, wait a second, that like the arms look familiar. And I was like, what other model has sort of 3 finger hands that would kind of be outstretched like that? And actually, it's the Gene Stealers. So that means someone at Games Workshop, when building the models for the website itself and the box art, which actually I'll just grab that so you can see. Yeah. So we look there on the front. You notice how the arms on that middle fella don't have the Batman wings and are obviously much longer than the arms that I have on mine. Gene Stealers. So if you want that specific arm aesthetic for yours, I hate to tell you, you're going to have to buy another box of models to get it. And I'm not willing to do that. But I actually do kind of like the arms on there with the sort of Batman gauntlets. I went with the melee focused ones because I thought they were cooler, and my Tyranids were meant to be the antithesis of my Tau, so very punchy and brutal in that way. And in a similar vein, I went with Venom Thropes. So the Venom Thrope kit can build Venom Thropes or Zoanthropes, the Brain Boys. I went with these guys. They're a little bit more melee focused. They also provide stealth and benefit of cover to units nearby. A little bit of a oversimplification of that rule, but I also just really like their aesthetic, that kind of Cthulhu-esque kind of maw with the tentacles and everything. They really like one another. They hold each other's hands quite a bit, which can be a bit of a pain when you're moving them around and trying to get them into very specific places. But they are pretty cool, and I really do enjoy them. The Von Ryan's Leapers. Honestly, a super cool unit. Infiltrate, fights first. Honestly, very good attacks. I would say if you're looking at these guys, they come in the combat patrol, which is nice. But if you're looking at running them, I would highly recommend running them in troops of 6. Gives them a little bit more staying power, and the clapback is super real. Each of these guys get 6 attacks. So having 6, 36 coming in with decent strength against most infantry. They are great for charge blocking because they will also be able to always fight first when the unit charges into them. Super cool. As you can see, this one, similar to one of the other warriors, actually has a speckled pattern, sort of like polka dots. I kind of like the idea with them that they are meant to be stealthy. So they actually have adapted with similar camouflaging patterns as most earthly animals, but to adapt to this sort of like barren lunar sort of surface that they're stuck on. And then I got my little spore mines, which if you've played against Tyranids, these things are probably the bane of your existence, especially if they're fixing behind enemy lines. And for my last trick, arguably the coolest tray I have, it is my swarm tray, which, how can you look at this and not want to play Tyranids? I mean, just an entire tray of biomass-loving freaks. And it's like the ground is moving with them. I primarily have and run primarily the Hormagaunts, which are the nice little speckled melee boys. So, see if I can get that to come into focus. There we go. And as you can see, I've tallied them. So each squad of 10 has a tally on them. And that way, I am able to very quickly determine which one is from which squad. Because let's face it, as you saw in the previous clip of them all on the same field, it is very easy to lose which ones are which. And I don't want to accidentally keep a unit that should be dead, nor accidentally remove a unit that should still be alive. Then we got some Ripper Swarms. The Parasite of Mortrex, which is such a cool model. I'll pull that one back up here in a sec. It can spawn these as it kills infantry models, which is not difficult for him. Oop. The Parasite of Mortrex. Very, very cool model. But yeah, it spawns D3. Yeah, a unit of D3 Ripper Swarms that can pop up within 3 inches of it and within engagement range of an enemy. And Ripper Swarms have the ability that says that they have the objective control characteristic of models they're in engagement range with. So yeah, they really do some work, which is a lot of fun. And it's just a really fascinating idea. Some of the lore behind the Parasite is that it basically swoops down at the speed of sound and just stabs as many infantry as it can to basically xenomorph birth into their chest, and then the Ripper Swarms rip out of them. And then one of the last units, Barbgaunts. Very cool model, at least. I don't actually run these guys currently, but they are not bad. They slow units they hit on movement and charges, which is pretty good. And I think against my friend who plays World Eaters all the time, it actually would be worth making an exception for them. And then lastly, we got some Termagants, the shooty ones. If I can get it to focus, there we go. Don't really run these guys either. I really went full tilt into melee. Not saying that these guys are bad by any means, but my Hormagaunts are sort of sacrificial. They get some early points, and then they just lock up things within the first turn or two to be able to get my big boys in line and be able to knock them out. But honestly, Tyranids are super fun. They can be a little bit expensive at times. There's some kits that just have really poor points to dollar ratios, but they're actually, in my opinion, they actually are quite a fun army and sort of worth that cost, especially because they do have a lot of the, they probably have the most like customization out of many of the factions. And then here I have 2 Carnifexes that are not done painted, or not finished painted. How's that sentence supposed to go? I have not finished painting them. Just kind of got stuck in working on some Tau stuff. So, but I love the Carnifexes. I honestly am hoping that I can maybe get a few more of these, and I'm really hoping that GW doesn't come out with a kit that's better than this one. And honestly, I think I'd be even more disappointed if they came out with a kit that is worse than that one. It is an older kit, so it is probably in risk of getting a upgrade. But I really hope it comes with as much customization as those ones do. There's just a lot of really cool bits and baubles that you can put on them to make them very unique. Sure, yeah, I'll just show a few more of the ones I have in progress. So, I have my next Cold Star, Commander for Tau. Decided to give him a bit more of a dynamic pose. I may try and go back in to kind of have him stand more like this instead, like that be the vertical stance. But kind of like the idea of him sort of taking off or landing almost in this, I don't want to say angelic, but that's like the best way I can sort of phrase it. And then this time with my crisis suits, I don't think I'll show all of them, but I'll show a few. I decided to put them on the paint stand or on the flight stand to paint them. It definitely helped with the priming stage. So I'll be interested to see how it's going to handle the paint, the actual painting stage. I always have a hard time with getting them on the painting blocks that I usually use. So these are like bits of XPS foam. So I build terrain and stuff with these, but I always end up with some offcuts. So I basically just turn them into paint handles. Just, some 3M foam tape on there and stick down the model. It's great for, this size infantry. A lot of other models are fine to use it with. Honestly, anything like the size of the Carnifex or bigger, I typically just hold in paint. Kind of risk, wiping off some of the paint, but if you're careful and sort of do some matte layering in between, you'll be able to be just fine. And I do have some sisters units. So my wife enjoys the game. She enjoys playing, and she kind of wants an army of her own. So she chose Sisters of Battle. She thinks their aesthetic is really cool. She wanted more of a Baroque kind of color scheme. So kind of working on this one as sort of a side project, as I'm also working on getting my own stuff kind of set up and ready so I can play full size games with all my other armies. But yeah, the 40K hobby has been a ton of fun to find myself back into. I really do like tabletop wargaming. I think it's a really fun way to play. Kind of the longer game sessions are a lot of fun. You get to kind of joke around and have a lot of fun with your friends and that sort of thing. In Magic the Gathering, I played Commander, so I'm used to longer games. And having the group mindset there, so playing with 3, 4, 5, up to like 8 or more players is a lot of fun and causes for some kind of zany moments. And at my shop, we actually typically will also do multiplayer games. So we'll do like 2v1s, 2v2s, free-for-alls and that sort of thing. Just making the game a bit more fun and casual. We have some players that are a bit more competitive, and then we have people that are like me, really casual. I am trying to get better at the game. I enjoy winning, but it's not all about that for me. I try to win every game, and sometimes I fail horribly, but I have fun. I learn from my mistakes, and I'm getting a little bit better every day, which is honestly a victory for me. But yeah, I'm kind of planning on doing these sort of streams weekly, probably around the same time, 4-ish o'clock Eastern time. And I think next week I'll kind of talk through more succinctly kind of starting in the hobby, what I think I did right, what I may have done wrong, and stuff like that. So if you're catching this after I went live today, feel free to come and hang out next week, probably Tuesday the 8th. Yeah, Tuesday, July the 8th. And we'll have a good time and talk about starting the hobby and getting brought in if you're not already, or if you're thinking about a new army and that sort of thing. But until next time, guys, keep it real. Bye, everybody.